Imagine dawn over the Pacific Ocean. Fog drifts across the water, concealing the horizon, and suddenly, from this gray veil emerges a silhouette so enormous that it seems not a ship, but an entire floating island. A steel colossus nearly 300 meters long, as wide as a city avenue, as tall as a 10-story building. 9 massive guns, each capable of hurling a shell weighing 1.5 tons over 40 kilometers. Armor over half a meter thick, impenetrable to any weapon of that era. This is Yamato, the largest, most powerful, most formidable warship ever built by mankind. It was constructed in absolute secrecy. Shipyards were covered with enormous canopies so that even from the air, no one could see what was being born in the depths of Japanese docks. Thousands of workers labored day and night, understanding they were building not merely a ship. They were erecting a symbol of the Empire's invincibility, a weapon meant to decide the fate of the coming war in a single decisive battle. Yamato was a challenge to the entire world, Japan's answer to the enemy's numerical superiority. If we cannot build hundreds of battleships, we will build one that can sink them all. But the story of this steel giant would become not a triumph, but a tragedy. The tragedy of a ship that arrived too late to its era. The tragedy of 3,000 sailors who embarked on their final voyage with no hope of return. This is a story about how humanity's greatest engineering achievement transformed into a floating coffin, how a symbol of strength became a monument to doom. Chapter 1. The Doctrine of Decisive Battle. To understand why Japan needed Yamato, we must return to the early 20th century, the year 1905, the Battle of Tsushima. A young island empire crushed the Russian fleet so devastatingly that the world froze in astonishment. Japan proved that a war's outcome could be decided by one grand naval engagement. This idea became forever etched into the consciousness of Japanese admirals. They called this doctrine Kantai Kessen, the decisive battle. The concept was simple and ruthless. Concentrate all fleet power in one place, at one time, deliver a mortal blow to the enemy, and alter the course of history. But this required weapons of absolute superiority, ships that no one else possessed. In the 1930s, Japan confronted harsh reality. The Washington Naval Treaty strictly limited the construction of warships. America was permitted more, Japan less. Britain had an enormous fleet. The United States possessed industrial might capable of mass-producing dozens of battleships. But Japan? It lacked both the resources and factories for mass production. Tokyo understood they could not win a race of quantity. Only one path remained: superiority of quality. Build not many ships, but several monsters, each worth an entire squadron. When Japan demonstratively withdrew from the Washington Agreement, the world did not yet know what it was planning. But in the secret chambers of the Naval Ministry, blueprints for a monster ship were already being born. The project received the code name Superbattleship Type A. The designers held nothing back. They planned to create something unprecedented, a ship displacing over 70,000 tons, armed with guns never before installed on any fleet. 18-inch cannons, 460 millimeters in diameter. Each gun weighed more than 160 tons. A single shell could penetrate any armor in the world. Chapter 2. The Secret Behind Steel Walls. 1937. At the shipyards in Kure and Nagasaki, construction began on 2 giants, Yamato and its twin Musashi. The secrecy was unprecedented. Special roofs and canopies were erected over the slipways to hide the ship's contours from reconnaissance aircraft. Workers were forbidden to speak about the project even with family. American intelligence received only fragmentary rumors about some unusual battleships, but had no precise data. Yamato's construction required rebuilding the entire Kure shipyard. New cranes capable of lifting hundreds of tons were installed. Docks were expanded. The finest quality steel was procured. Every detail of this giant was manufactured with jeweler's precision. Armor plates for the main turrets reached thicknesses of 65 centimeters, a wall of steel, impenetrable by anything. The hull grew month by month. Workers gazed at it with both reverence and fear. Reverence, because they were creating something unique. Fear, because they understood what this monster was being built for. Japan was preparing for a great war, and Yamato was meant to be its trump card. 1941, August. Yamato was launched and officially commissioned. The ceremony proceeded without pomp or fanfare. Secrecy was still maintained. The crew, selected from the Empire's finest sailors, proudly boarded. For them, serving on Yamato was the highest honor. To be assigned to the world's most powerful ship meant becoming part of history. Chapter 3. The Steel Monster. When you examine Yamato's technical specifications, it takes your breath away. Length 263 meters. Beam 38.5 meters. Full load displacement exceeding 72,000 tons. This was greater than any battleship in the world. The German Bismarck weighed 50,000 tons. American Iowa-class battleships displaced around 45,000. Yamato was 1.5 times heavier. The main armament astounded the imagination. 9 guns of 460mm caliber, mounted in 3 turrets. Each turret weighed as much as a medium destroyer. Shells weighing 1.5 tons could fly distances up to 42 kilometers. A salvo from all 9 guns launched nearly 14 tons of metal and explosives into the air. A hit from even one such shell guaranteed the destruction of any enemy vessel. But Yamato's strength lay not only in heavy guns. Along the sides were mounted 12 dual-purpose guns of 155mm caliber. Anti-aircraft armament included dozens of rapid-fire automatic weapons, from 25mm mounts to heavy machine guns. The battleship was surrounded by a veritable forest of barrels, creating a wall of fire against enemy aviation. The power plant generated over 150,000 horsepower. 4 turbines spun 4 propeller shafts, accelerating the 70,000-ton behemoth to speeds of 27 knots, over 50 kilometers per hour. For such mass, this was impressive speed. Fuel capacity allowed traveling several thousand miles, crossing the entire Pacific Ocean. The armor protection deserves special mention. Nearly 1/3 of the ship's weight was armor. The main belt reached thicknesses exceeding 40 centimeters. The deck consisted of several layers of steel with total thickness up to 20 centimeters, designed to withstand aerial bomb impacts. Main battery turrets were protected by plates 65 centimeters thick at the front. This was a true fortress on water. The crew numbered over 3,000 personnel. Inside, Yamato was an entire city. Living quarters, galleys, hospital, workshops, storerooms. On the stern were catapults for launching reconnaissance seaplanes. These aircraft were the ship's eyes, allowing detection of enemies beyond the horizon and fire correction at maximum range. Comparing Yamato to other battleships of that time, it becomes obvious. It surpassed them all. The American Iowa was faster, but its 16-inch guns were inferior to Japanese cannons. The British King George V had good armor but smaller displacement. The German Bismarck, which terrorized the Atlantic, seemed a dwarf beside Yamato. The Japanese had created the absolute weapon of naval warfare. But there was one problem. The world had changed. The age of battleships was ending. The era of aircraft carriers and naval aviation was dawning. Chapter 4. War Without Glory. December 7, 1941. Japanese aviation attacks Pearl Harbor. America enters the war. At this moment, Yamato is already in the battle line, but is not entrusted with participating in the daring raid. Instead, the battleship becomes flagship of the combined fleet. Its deck houses the headquarters of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the man who designed the plan to attack the American base. From this moment begins the strange fate of the world's greatest ship. Yamato transforms into a floating command post. Conferences are conducted aboard, strategic decisions made, operations planned. But its guns remain silent. Japanese command understands. A giant on whose construction colossal resources were spent cannot be risked in the first battles. The war's first months bring Japan victory after victory. Philippines, Singapore, Malaya, Dutch East Indies, Allied bases fall one after another. But these successes are achieved by carrier forces and naval aviation. Yamato remains in the rear, like a predator awaiting its moment. June 1942. The Battle of Midway Atoll, the war's first turning point. The Japanese fleet plans to deliver a crushing defeat to the Americans. Yamato participates in the operation, but again as a staff ship. Its enormous guns fire not a single shot, and the battle's outcome is decided by aircraft. 4 Japanese carriers are destroyed. For the first time it becomes clear the era of battleships has ended, but Tokyo refuses to believe it. For 2 years, Yamato and Musashi remain at anchor or escort fleet formations without engaging in combat. Sailors train, practice gunnery, maintain mechanisms in perfect condition. But their time does not come. The war passes them by. Chapter 5. The Bloody Waters of Leyte. October 1944. Americans begin operations to liberate the Philippines. For Japan, this is a critical moment. Loss of the Philippine archipelago will cut the empire off from oil and resources of Southeast Asia. Without them, the war becomes hopeless. Japanese command makes a desperate decision: commit all fleet forces to battle, including Yamato and Musashi. October 23rd. Japanese ships move toward Leyte Gulf. The plan is simple and bold. Break through to the American landing site and shell the transports with direct fire. If they can destroy the amphibious forces, the American offensive will collapse. But from the very beginning, everything goes wrong. American submarines detect the Japanese squadron and attack with torpedoes. Several cruisers sustain damage. Then aviation launches. Hundreds of bombers and torpedo planes descend upon the Japanese ships. Musashi, Yamato's twin, bears the brunt of the assault. Wave after wave of aircraft attack the giant battleship. Torpedoes blast its sides, bombs pierce decks. Despite monstrous resilience, after dozens of hits, Musashi begins listing. Water floods compartments. The crew desperately fights for survivability, but after hours of continuous attacks, the ship capsizes and goes down. Japan loses one of its 2 unsinkable giants. Yamato is luckier. It takes several bomb hits, fires break out aboard, but armor holds. For the first time, its guns open fire on the enemy at full power. Fiery salvos raise columns of water as high as multi-story buildings. Even Americans acknowledge, witnessing Yamato's gunfire is like seeing nature's wrath itself. But the power of its guns is helpless against the enemy's air supremacy. Admiral Kurita, commanding the Japanese squadron, seeing Musashi's death and continuous air attacks, understands. If he continues the advance, he will lose Yamato too. He orders withdrawal. The operation has failed. For Yamato's crew, this is a devastating ordeal. They demonstrated their ship's power for the first time, but were forced to retreat without completing the mission. The Battle of Leyte becomes the largest naval engagement in history, but it definitively proves battleships can no longer withstand aircraft carriers. Chapter 6. The Final Voyage. April 1945. The war is hopelessly lost. American forces have already captured Iwo Jima and landed on Okinawa. A few more months, and they will storm the Japanese home islands themselves. Everyone in Tokyo understands this, but the Empire will not surrender without a fight. Japanese command develops a plan that seems madness even to its creators. Operation Tengo, Heavenly Operation. Yamato, together with a small squadron of destroyers and a cruiser, must break through to Okinawa, beach itself, and transform into an immobile artillery battery. With its fire, it must support Japanese troops on the island and inspire them to resist. But there is one terrible detail. Yamato has fuel only for a one-way trip. Under conditions of total blockade, Japan simply lacks reserves to ensure return. Effectively, 3,000 sailors are being sent to certain death, and everyone knows this, from admirals to ordinary seamen. When the captain announces the order to the crew, heavy silence reigns aboard. No one refuses to carry out the assignment. For them, service on Yamato is the highest honor, and to die for the emperor means fulfilling duty to the end. Some pray, some write final letters to relatives, knowing they will never be sent. Some hide small talismans, hoping for miracles, but most have already accepted the inevitable. On April 6th, Yamato departs Kure Base. Accompanying it are a light cruiser and 8 destroyers, all that remains of the once mighty combined fleet. The Japanese have no air cover. All remaining aircraft are committed to defending the homeland. This is a suicide mission in its purest form. The first day passes calmly. The giant cuts through waves, racing southward. On deck, sailors prepare guns, check ammunition, distribute duties. Some believe fortune will smile, that they will break through to shore and unleash fire on the Americans. Others remain silent, understanding. This is the end. American reconnaissance quickly detects the Japanese squadron's sortie. U.S. headquarters understands, if Yamato breaks through to Okinawa, even beached, it can inflict enormous damage. The order is unambiguous: destroy the battleship at sea at any cost. Chapter 7. Steel Inferno. April 7th morning. Dawn rises over the ocean. On Yamato's bridge, observers notice dots on the horizon. They rapidly approach, and soon it becomes clear. This is American aviation. Hundreds of aircraft. Bombers, torpedo planes, fighter escorts. An entire armada launched from multiple carriers. Alarm sounds throughout the ship. Anti-aircraft gunners take positions. Turrets swing toward the sky. The clang of metal, shouts of commands, clatter of mechanisms are heard. Yamato prepares for its final battle. Anti-aircraft guns open hurricane fire. Thousands of shells soar skyward, bursting in bright flashes. Tracer bullets draw fiery lines. The air fills with thunder, roar of engines, scream of falling bombs. Gun crews work to exhaustion, loading and firing again and again. Americans direct first attacks at escort destroyers. They are less protected and quickly take hits. One after another, ships are engulfed in flames. They explode and go under. Yamato's sailors witness comrades dying, but have no time to mourn. Torpedo planes are already diving at the main target. Yamato begins maneuvering, executing heavy turns, attempting to evade. But the 70,000-ton behemoth cannot dodge all torpedoes. The first strikes the port side. The explosion rocks the hull. Steel bulkheads shudder. Water gushes into compartments. Pumps begin working, but this is only the beginning. Wave after wave aircraft attack the battleship. Bombs pierce decks, explode inside the ship, starting fires. Smoke obscures everything around. The stench of burning and white-hot metal is unbearable. Anti-aircraft gunners fire to the last, even as barrels glow red-hot. The sky above Yamato is strewn with burning wreckage of downed aircraft. But there are too many. Torpedoes continue finding their mark. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Each explosion makes the hull shudder. List to port becomes noticeable. Water floods ever more compartments. The crew desperately fights for survivability, sealing breaches, extinguishing fires. But nothing can stop the inevitable. Around midday, Americans concentrate strikes on one side. 11th, 12th torpedo. List becomes critical. Inside sounds the horrifying screech of breaking metal. Turrets tear from mountings. The giant begins capsizing. And then the terrible happens. Fire reaches the main battery ammunition magazines. An explosion of monstrous force rips the ship apart. A pillar of fire, hundreds of meters high, shoots into the sky. The shockwave throws American planes off course. The thunder is heard for tens of kilometers. When smoke clears, at the location of history's greatest battleship, only the boiling surface of ocean remains. Debris, oil slicks, burning remnants. Of over 3,000 crew members, fewer than 300 survived. The rest went down with their ship into the depths of the Pacific Ocean. Epilogue. The story of Yamato is a story of tragedy, the tragedy of a ship created for an era already ended by the time of its birth. Battleships lost the war to aircraft carriers. Armor and massive guns proved powerless against air supremacy. Japan invested in Yamato colossal resources, hopes, ambitions. It was meant to become a symbol of the empire's invincibility. Instead, it became a symbol of its doom. The world's greatest ship spent most of the war at anchor, because command feared losing it. And when finally committed to final battle, it was a voyage of no return. But the feat of 3,000 sailors who embarked on that final voyage remains forever in history. They knew they were going to their deaths, knew their sacrifice would not change the war's outcome, but went to the end because it was their duty. The wreckage of Yamato rests on the bottom of the East China Sea at a depth exceeding 300 meters. There, in eternal darkness, lies the memory of the last giant of the battleship era, of a ship that was too large, too powerful, and arrived too late to this world.